Hi everyone, this is my January 2024 reading wrap-up. Now this I read 5 books, which is a lot for me, and even though a number of them were short books, I was pretty happy with the variety of books that I read this month, so let's just get into it. Up first is Other Birds by Sarah Addison Allen. This novel primarily follows Zoe, who's a young girl who's about to start college. She's going to college in South Carolina, and she decides to move into her deceased mother's apartment early, which is also in South Carolina on the fictional island of Mallow Island. Once she moves in, she encounters an array of characters and birds. There are hints of magical realism throughout the novel, and I found this to be quite a touching read. Most of the characters endured some type of hardship as a child, and it was interesting to see how those experiences impacted and influenced their behaviors and actions in the present day, at least the present day of the novel. I found this to be medium to fast paced, and there are a lot of little mysteries sprinkled in throughout the novel. But honestly, the most memorable part of this book to me was in the author's notes at the end of the book. Sarah Addison Allen mentions that she was caring for her ailing mother at the time. I believe her mother had dementia, and she was in and out of lucidity. And she decided, she as in Sarah Addison Allen, decided to let her mom know about some of the book ideas and premises she was having. And when she mentioned the premise for Other Birds, her mother said, "Oh, you should definitely do that one." And so that was such a touching moment, and it just really stuck out to me as I'm doing my own novel writing class and thinking through different premises. So even though it wasn't necessarily part of the novel, it was part of the book, and I found it to be just quite memorable. Anyway, I found this novel to be quite hopeful and engaging, and it was an overall 4.25-star read for me. Next up is Bina by Nino Cipri. This story follows Ava and Jules, who are a queer couple who just broke up, and they both work at the same big box furniture store, which I think is supposed to mirror IKEA. There's a multiverse and an elderly woman who has kind of slipped into this multiverse, who then Ava and Jules have to go retrieve. There's a lot going on in this 103-page book, which I read on my Kindle. The critique of capitalism and soul-sucking work environments came through clearly and often. And to be completely honest, I really didn't connect with the characters, Ava and Jules, but I really enjoyed the elderly woman character. This was a medium pace read for me, and I think my favorite part of the book, besides the elderly woman character, was the more subtler themes that came through, especially surrounded, what it means to have different versions of ourselves and how we might relate to one another. This book honestly had me thinking in different ways, which I appreciated, and I think I might check out the next books in the series. This was an interesting shorter novel and a 3.75-star read for me. Next up is The Benevolent Society of Ill-Mannered Ladies by Alison Goodman. This is a Regency-era story set in London, and it follows twins Lady Augusta and Lady Julia, who are 42 years old and who are kind of considered spinsters by everyone else, or the men in the society of their time. And they decide to help out other women who might be in need, especially those that have been ignored or actually persecuted by society at that time, especially men. This was a lot of fun, but also a bit heavy at times. Alison Goodman did not shy away from social issues impacting women during this era. And I also appreciated the diverse representation of people of different races and sexual orientations and the prejudices they faced at this time and how they were just depicted in this novel. Now, as much as I enjoy this, I found myself having to take a bit of a break at times because it felt a bit heavy to me. But I found myself quickly jumping back in because I was just so curious about what was going on and the mysteries that were unfolding. Now, I listened to this as an audiobook, and it was narrated by Kristen Atherton, who did a fantastic job. I ended up reading the last bits as an ebook because my library loan for the audiobook lapsed, but I just enjoyed it overall. This is book 1 in the series, and I'm really excited for book 2 whenever it might come out, and this was a solid 4.75-star read for me. Next up is The Uncommon Reader by Alan Bennett. This novel is a bit of speculative fiction, and it imagines Queen Elizabeth II getting into reading. Now, I'm not into British royal family history or gossip, but I found the premise to be quite intriguing, and this was a relatively short book at 120 pages, so I decided to give it a go. Now, the thing that I found the most interesting was the power dynamics between the Queen, her staff, political figures, and just other people. Now, I'm not sure how accurate this fictional depiction was, but I found myself a bit surprised at how it seemed that the queen didn't have as much agency as I thought she might. But I also didn't really understand the real power these other people, especially her staff members and political figures, had over her. So I just found that to be quite intriguing. This novel depicted her as living in this completely different world, and there was also this whole different language to this world. And I found myself having to look up a lot of words that I didn't know. So I really appreciated reading this on my Kindle, which made it easy to look up words. Now, in terms of pacing, I found it to be overall slow to medium paced. I really enjoyed the first part and the last part of the book, but the middle kind of dragged on at times, especially the second half. Overall, it was a 3.75 star read for me. Finally, the last book that I read this month was All the Horses of Iceland by Sarah Tolmie. Now, this book follows an Icelandic trader who goes off to Central Asia to retrieve horses to bring back to Iceland. And there are touches of magical realism throughout this book. Now, I learned about this book from a video by a book Olive, and I was quite intrigued, and it was also quite short, so I decided to check it out. Now, this comes in at 111 pages, but I opted to listen to it as an audiobook, and I thought the narrator, Ulf Borklund, did an amazing job narrating this novel. As an archaeologist, I found the depictions of these past landscapes to be quite interesting, but if I'm completely honest, I really didn't connect with the characters and the dialogue in this novel. I honestly was a bit put off by how some of the women were portrayed and represented in this novel. When it comes to pacing, I'm honestly not sure what to make of it because I felt that the transitions were a bit quick, especially when you went to different scenes. But I found that the stories dragged on a bit, so that slowed it down for me. I also wasn't sure what was happening, especially at the transitions and at certain moments, but that just could have been that I wasn't really connecting with the novel and therefore not really paying close attention. So even though I can recognize and appreciate the artistry in some of the historical depictions in this novel, it wasn't a personal favorite of mine, and therefore it's a 3.25 star read for me. So yeah, those were all the books that I read in January 2024. More than I think I usually read in a month. However, there were a number of shorter books sprinkled in there. And overall, I feel like I'm making decent progress with my 2024 bookish goals. So if you're curious what those are, I'll leave a link at the end with that, as well as a playlist of my other reading wrap-ups if you're interested in it. So yeah, that's all for today's video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.